Hello, this is Dave Carr. In 1969, I joined the 173rd Airborne Brigade in the Republic of South Vietnam, and I was deployed to a small group of six that lived in a village. Our job was to train the local militia, guard a school, protect the workers that were working on a Catholic church, and run a small medical aid station. The entire year I was stationed on or close to Highway 1. You can see here the little yellow dot. We were north of a small town called Bong Song, and then the closest village to us was a small village called Tam Quan. Uh, we weren't that far from the South China Sea, and the entire year was spent working with or around the indigenous people. And Christmas of that year, my parents sent me a Kodak 8mm camera, and what you're about to see is the pictures I took with that camera. A lot of the film got destroyed by the heat, but what we salvaged, we made into this short 10-minute movie. I hope you enjoy it. As I said in the introduction, most of the life in this area in Vietnam evolved around growing rice, harvesting the rice, and getting it to market. In the beginning of the movie, you see rice fields, people irrigating their rice paddies by scooping water out of the river, and then some of the kids taking care of the water buffalo. So in this area, all there was kids and women, and the men and older boys were either in the militia that were training with us or they were Viet Cong. So there was, as you can see, lots of young kids who were well behaved. And the countryside, unfortunately, this movie doesn't show it in great light, but the countryside was actually very beautiful, very tropical. And the beaches where we were at were just gorgeous. One of the things that we did was guard the units that would come through mine sweeping. So there's a series here where you see minesweepers going through a village. You can also see these the buildings with the corrugated tin roofs. Lots of goods hanging out. As far as I know, there wasn't any refrigeration, so they'd have to sell that food in about one day. It was extremely hot. There was no automation. There's a lady we're showing making a mat by hand, and these little mats were everywhere. So the people didn't have furniture. They would sit on these mats by squatting down, and so it wasn't very comfortable when we would go to visit them. Because I was the medic, I got to know a lot of people, and they would invite me to their house for tea or food. And to be honest with you, I wasn't very good at sitting on those mats. The first calf was in this area before we got there, and there must have been quite a bit of fighting going on because a lot of these palm trees had the tops blown off of them, and then a lot of the houses and the buildings were pretty well shot up. Part of the plan was that if we stayed here and tried to improve the living conditions and build up this church, that the people that were friendly to us would come back here and live here and squeeze out the Viet Cong. So there's a two-prong attack here. We had units that were in these hills that were constantly hunting for the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. And then the units that I was with, along with the militia we were training, would be on ambush patrols at night for when the Viet Cong would come down into the villages to get rice or get medical supplies or food or whatever. You're going to see a little bit of how they harvest the rice. And unfortunately, the movie doesn't have everything in sequence, but what would happen is at certain times of the year they would grow the sprouts in a little plot, and then after the monsoon season they would take those sprouts and take them to their larger plots. And I'm not sure how they establish ownership of those plots, but different families apparently had their own little plots there. So then they would plant the sprouts, and then when it came time to harvest, they'd cut them with a sickle, and then beat them in these baskets so that the husks would come off. And then you'll see one picture I had here where people were then shuffling the husks and throwing them up in the air to let the seeds come off. This is a very tough job and very labor intensive. And they used every bit of that rice. So the husks they would use for packing to provide insulation, and they would take the straw, make that into those little mats, and anything we left behind wherever we left from encampment, in about one day they'd pick it clean. So there is a shot here of them pulling up the seedlings, and then you see the flooded rice paddy, and they'll use the water buffaloes to help cultivate the land. No automation at all. No tractors, everything done by hand. And then the kids would work by taking care of the water buffalo, or they'd be charged with taking care of the siblings. So most of these shots here were taken from a bridge on Highway 1. In my last month in Vietnam, the United States gave up on the pacification program and pulled us out of duty guarding the church and working with the militia. And we went to Highway 1 and guarded bridges. That was actually fairly decent duty because the whole world was going up and down Highway 1 in the daylight time. and you could see a lot of people. Occasionally we would take a trip over to the ocean, and this was beautiful beaches. I never saw the North or the Vietnamese going in the water to swim. I saw them occasionally. They would go to the beach, but they didn't have bathing suits, and they would just like walk in ankle deep. I was kind of lucky because one of the guys that was with us was from California, and a couple times we went down to the ocean, and he showed me how to body surf, and it was great. Well, I hope you enjoyed this movie. And when I got back from Vietnam, I spent a long time showing this movie to people. And at that time, the protests were in full bloom. So I would take this movie and show it to people, and they'd be stunned because they were protesting against the war, and they didn't even know what we're fighting for or what the people were like. So I hope everything worked out for the Vietnamese. I suspect it didn't work out perfect for them, but they're very, very, very hardworking people.